Yeah.
Okay, well, we're ready to
Pretty
begin.
much, yeah, like.
We need a couple more from our side.
We have most of this and, oh,
Your
so
side.
we need-
Yeah, we're picking sides.
Oh, sorry.
We're all in this together.
Draw the line, draw the line.
And we're gonna win tonight.
Our commission, you, okay, I guess we have, all right, let's get started.
You
All right.
you just have the one on.
Yeah, we need one more.
James?
Colin, James, both said they'd be on,
Yeah.
and I thought Allison said she'd be here too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't see the other.
That should be online.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just give it one more minute, we can form a quorum.
Oh, there
There
you
we
go.
go.
Form made, nailed it.
Yeah, we'll miss them too.
It's all my fault.
It's
Yeah.
your
Might be
fault.
all your fault.
We were just gonna me to order.
Send out misinformation or?
Didn't you see the?
So it is 7:02 PM on Wednesday, July 2nd. We will go ahead and start the planning commission meeting for the month of July. We'll begin with a roll call for the planning commission. Drew Folk,
Simon Faribar.
Allison Miller.
Elizabeth Saul.
So we do have a joint meeting this month with city council. So the objective is to review the current 2025 docket, look at the remaining items for the rest of the year and reevaluate our priorities. And see if there's any additional items we'd like to bring to attention. So with that.
I need to call the council meeting to order.
Great.
And I'll call that council to order and we'll also do.
Ann Hesberg.
Shane Thayer.
Travis McMaster.
Mike, Sharon Waters. Okay. We are now ready. We've got 5, there's 2 missing.
All right, Maggie, I'll turn it over to you to walk through what we've achieved so far and what's left on the docket.
Walk, let's working through this, so our 2025 docket items. We have a couple of things that were still continued, the review of the management, housing, siting, and form regulations. We have, gone through a public hearing with that. There were a few changes that, might still be needed because of the ADU code changes, so that's been kind of on hold, but we'll be coming to you guys, sooner than later. The UGA boundaries block, was sent to the county for review and consideration. We have not heard back since we've had those discussions, so, with all kind of the county support at this point, so. Forward this year. Our docketed items, number 1, we just had the comp plan update, because that is kind of the bulk of what's going to happen this year into next year. The consultants are still doing a lot of background work, so a lot hasn't come to in front of the planning commission yet, but that will be toward the end of the year, I'd say fall and winter for sure. Is when more of that will be coming forward. They're currently working on the Parks and Rec plan along with the Parks and Rec element. So that's something that's working on a lot closely with John Sean's. That will be coming soon. The development regulations updates. This was one thing I was going to talk with both the council and planning commission tonight about reprioritizing this because it's technically not due until December of next year. And so if there's anything that we could reprioritize, we could move this one down in the priority ranking. Our inclusionary zoning, I've talked briefly with both the council and planning commission about this. I sent out an RFP with the requests due in April and did not receive any proposals. I did hear from one consulting company that the $50,000 budget just wasn't enough to do a feasibility and nexus study. So tonight the goal would be just to ask what direction you want us to go. If maybe we just start with feasibility, if maybe we look at other techniques and incentives that might make more sense for a community our size. So just so you know where we're at on that. We have talked a little about parking. wanted to know, again, interest on the fee in lieu of, we've started our little discussions on this, and this is something that, again, just want some more input from the council on. Number 5 is the changes for accessory dwelling units for House Bill 1337. We actually did hold a public hearing on this already and did not receive any comments. No one attended that hearing. So this will be coming to the council. We'll be discussing it, not at the second meeting. I think it's on the 22nd, study session, and then hopefully have a hearing in August for those meetings. I did include a draft of that in your packet, so you have a heads up what's coming. And that if there were any questions, you would have the opportunity to at least talk about it tonight. The next was evaluating triplexes. We have not gotten to that. Our first goal was to get through the 80 first. Triplexes after that. And then we just had the other considerations that were here. That obviously we haven't really done much into. The ADU code took a lot of time. I think it took a few months, and then we ended up not having a quorum also for one of our meetings. So we haven't gotten into any of those other considerations. So tonight, I'm hoping it's a quick meeting for all of you. I don't want to take too much time since I know we've gone round and round about all of this, but just wanted to, I guess, reprioritize, see if we're missing anything. Is now be the time to add if you'd like to see added to this topic.
Great, thank you, Maggie. So with that quick update, I guess, I'll open it up for discussion, or any feedback, on kind of what's been laid out. I mean, obviously, comprehensive plan is, it's something that we're not really in our hands at the moment and waiting for a lot of the work in the back end to happen. So we haven't really been in action upon it. Moving past that, the inclusionary zoning is something I know it's been a top priority for the city council for some time now. But being that we haven't been able to get anyone to bid on a nexus study, we're looking, I guess, for more guidance on what the direction is there. Should we continue to keep this as a priority? We know there's not much that we can do at the moment, or is there another path forward on that one? Obviously, parking is on our list, and probably one of the next ones will be taken up. The ADU, we did actually move that one forward. That one's should be moving to you in your next meeting. And then the last one on the list is triplexes, and we'll kind of talk about where that sits on our current plan. And if there's any guidance there. So, I'll open it up if there's any thoughts or direction from city council.
Shot in the dark question, but on the inclusionary zoning, assuming since there has been no interest from anybody on the viewing site, that we are getting feedback from anybody either on why they're not showing interest. Is that fair to say, or do we?
Maggie said that, okay, go for it.
Funding, so they basically to do a nexus study and a
The
feasibility.
Together, I put an RFP out. I gave them the month to submit. I didn't receive any submittals. I did reach out and I heard from one of the consultants that I had worked with before, and they said that the $50,000 that was budgeted was not enough to cover them doing that. So the question was, and my apologies, it was end of April that that deadline was, and I just put a lot on my plate, so.
I mean, I guess the question is, could we break out the nexus and the feasibility?
Right, that would be a question, is do we do feasibility first, say, would this even work in our community? And then if we do, if this proposal will work, then we get that nexus study done. That was just the recommendation from when I went to legal, that we were gonna go with the option to add a fee, to like a permit fee almost, that we needed to go through that process.
Did they specifically say we needed to do both a feasibility study and a nexus?
So if we want to just do a feasibility study on inclusionary zoning, which in its true form is mandating affordable housing in certain projects. So once you hit 10, somebody's proposing 10 or more units.
Right.
And we had that conversation over the course of all last year.
Yeah.
Little year forward calculator and trying to figure that out. So I think here we were trying to look at a different option. We looked at Hood River where they have an excise tax based system, which we don't have here, but how could we kind of use that as like an affordable housing impact fee almost on new developments?
So would a feasibility study? I guess I'm wondering if we already decided it's not really feasible to do. Like, because of the scale of
Right.
development in Leavenworth, to
Yeah.
say. Like. To do the, like, affordable housing is mandatory for a certain number of units, like, we kind of just decided that that's not feasible, and so. Can we skip to just the nexus study if we have to do one or the other? To
See where that point
see
is.
if we can do a fee model instead,
And that,
or do we like, do we have to do a feasibility study is essentially my question, and what would come out of it if we already know that like the standard inclusionary zoning model is not probably feasible?
So I've got a question. We've been kicking this thing around a lot. I thought the nexus study and the feasibility was the same thing. The nexus tells you it's feasible. Two different studies. How do we know it's not feasible? Have we done a study or are we just anecdotal?
Well, the inclusionary zoning, we know, we just don't have the size of projects. The places where it would have made sense are the two big projects that basically been
Right.
done. So we don't think that there's enough
Dirt?
potential to get that size of units, to get those numbers of units. So looking at an alternative was, again, this added on fee for every, building permit.
And why you do the fee is because if you build 10 units, you gotta make 10% of them, people build 9 units. If you say you build 5 units and you gotta do one, people build 4 units.
Yeah.
And so that's where, from the standpoint, it felt like the better way to go about it would be to just charge a blanket fee
Mhm.
for every building permit that we see.
Right.
And that way we know that we will have some sort of money going to the fund as opposed to trying to create it through the inclusionary zoning and finding out that everything we do just gets sidestepped somehow.
So that's like Mount Hood.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
Hood River.
Hood
yeah.
River.
Okay, Hood River, yeah. Hood River. So what does the nexus study tell us?
is it legally gonna charge those who do that?
The nexus is, what it looks at is, you have to tie what that fee would be to the impact that it has on the housing market. So it's a technical study to show the nexus between those two, so that you can justify
Charging
adding
fee?
that, yeah.
And I think if maybe we called it like a affordable housing impact fee versus inclusionary zoning, like.
Right,
it
yeah,
might make
you can
more
change
sense.
change the title of it.
So we as a city don't have the right to do that without this nexus study?
We don't have a right to charge any fees without a nexus to what that fee is going towards. For instance, I mean, it's the same, it's no different than charging a permit fee to begin with. We have to show that we have a cost that's covered by that permit. We
Okay,
can't just say, oh, we're gonna charge whatever we want as a fee. We have to have a nexus to what it costs us. So in this case, it's more difficult because on a permit, we know we got staff time, we can add that up, we can document it, whatever. It gets trickier when you're saying, how do you provide that nexus to what that housing need is and its impact on creating that need? So in order for us to charge a fee for housing, whatever fee you want to call it, but for creating some more housing, we have to have that nexus that justifies us doing that fee.
and that's what Hood River pulled off.
Theirs is an excise tax fee.
Theirs is,
Theirs is
yeah,
different.
theirs is different, but we're not we're not in Oregon, so.
Yeah,
So
Washington's
it
a little
worked at
different.
Hood River, is probably not, we don't think that's gonna work there.
Well, we're
It'd
trying
be
to do this
it's just a
similar.
Different,
Okay.
it's like the way you charge the fee is like under a different, you know, it's like, it's a fee instead of a tax sort of thing, just because of state rules.
Right, yeah.
But it would be very similar that if you are doing new construction, you pay an additional fee and that fee goes into an affordable housing fund. And the only way to not pay the fee is to build affordable housing.
Well, that's the other option.
Yeah,
there is
yeah,
an
that's all,
incentive.
that's always,
There
that's
is
always
an
available,
incentive
They're not
with
gonna
it
take it,
as
but
well.
that's the other
Yeah.
option.
correct.
Would the Nexus document include justification for a certain value for this fee, or would we actually need to have some sort of guidance document that would justify where we end up landing on that? Because it can't just be an arbitrary fee. We can't just say every building permit gets a $2,000 fee. You know what I mean? So it has to be, it has to be justified, and it probably needs to be a percentage of the total cost of construction if you're not building affordable housing, that sort of thing, you know, but there has to be some guidance for how we're justifying the fee, right? Or is it a flat fee for every building permit, or is it just residential building permits? Is it also commercial building permits? Those sorts of things. So I feel like we also need some guidance before we're creating the Nexus document, right? And I don't know if that would be a part of the feasibility, or if it would be something else tied in with that. If it's coupled with the Nexus document so that we can justify it with the state to make sure we're meeting state law for this fee. I feel like,
Would that be part of the Nexus study?
I mean,
That's
but-
typically part of Nexus studies, that there's proportionality requirements that are legally required for fees. And so that proportionality to the size of the impact and the size of the benefit is usually measured throughout the Nexus. And then usually the results of the Nexus study is some sort of range of an appropriate fee and how it is charged, like per unit, per square foot, however.
And how I write that RFP will, I mean, it can include those components, this is what we needed to include.
And a per square foot would make more sense because I don't know, does the city require a cost breakdown for when a building permit is put through? Because if you're saying to, you know.
the building permits are based on the cost of construction.
Oh, okay.
But there's,
Yeah.
yeah, the jurisdictions have a chart of like,
Understood.
it's usually
Yeah, the
this, you know,
IBC.
conditioned space is this amount per square foot
Okay.
and garages are this much per square foot index or this much. So they just value it that way. Except for remodels where you make it up.
Are there no other Washington state or Washington state cities or towns that charges a fee for?
Not that I'm aware of, but
Like a Raven Hood River.
just charges.
Or in
me.
Washington.
In
It's usually built into the, you know, but because they have developable space, those cities are just waiting for the developers to do it, and then these zonings, you know, zoning rules take place and developments get built, but here we don't have the space for it. Yeah, like we've seen.
We have incentives, in fact, we have our affordable housing code and our incentives that nobody uses.
Nobody uses
Yep.
it.
Nobody's. So the incentives aren't working. So we've got a housing crisis. And I just can't accept the fact we can't do anything about it. As far as,
Well,
I mean,
we're trying.
Well, I think there's a lot of things we can do about it.
That's what this conversation's
Yeah,
about.
Yeah.
yeah,
and I think that you guys can direct us to look at those things. I think that
Okay.
R3 zoning is one of those things that's huge, but I don't want to jump too far ahead. I
Right.
think that I feel like there are a lot of things that we can do about it, and I feel like that's, if you guys give us the direction, we can look into those things and see.
We've done some like the cottage housing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Condominiumization, that's awesome. Like creating more availability for ownership at a lower price point is huge. However, we can make that happen.
it's more affordable, Simon, but it's not affordable housing.
That's true.
Right.
That's the difference.
Affordable housing.
It's all relative.
Phrase in terms of a lot of things, right?
Right. It's better, 450,000 is better than 650.
Well, that's true, but I think there's steps of that. Like, I mean, I just took a quick visit to Sun Valley, with my kids, and the prices there are mind boggling.
Yeah.
And as I watch Leavenworth continue up, I like to see the diversity in ideas that, you know, allow us more flexibility inside what we already have. And I think that, you know, these sort of things are important to that. That's why I'm a huge fan of this Nexus study, if we can, you know, see what it is and get something in place. And start putting some money away, whatever we do with that money and what we have planned with that. You guys take care of that, but to start the process, I think would be huge, because that's how you do it. I mean, thinking about it and seeing if we can get some help or, make some developers do some things, these are good ideas, but how do we start something that's
Take
like,
control.
tangible and like, today, not a year from now.
Right.
So the other option is to, I mean, you could separate them, or you could say, let's up our budget and go after the thing that we need, so that we get that nexus started. If we gotta get more to get the feasibility to the nexus. I mean, that's the other option.
Is the feasibility study
I think they're-
necessary?
That's what I'm.
Or can we just do the nexus study?
Yeah.
I'm
And start,
taking a look from legal, but if we can not call it inclusionary zoning and call it what it is.
Right. Right, then they don't have to maybe do the study around
Oh,
inclusionary, cause that's not what we're asking
Right.
for. We're just asking for the nexus.
yeah, we're not doing.
It's kind of in lieu of inclusionary, actually,
Yeah,
because we
right.
tried that and it doesn't seem to
Yeah.
do anything,
Yeah.
so let's look at a different avenue.
Does this make a difference when, like I said, changing the name inclusionary for the criteria? Looking at, separate from this, and even aside from this committee, is charging a fee for 40% of second homes here that we discussed, right?
Yeah.
Could this be a part of that?
No,
Is
that
it case-
required the change of the legislature.
Yeah.
We
that's-
can't
that's
add,
different.
I just
we
want to make
can't
sure
add
we're all
taxes
talking about.
without a change of the
Good
legislature.
idea.
Fees, the
No,
fees,
it is,
stuck on the
it's a
fees.
great
the fees,
idea,
same
and
kinda, yeah.
I'll tell you what they.
To buy
told me.
property, this is
Call
what we're
your,
talking
call
about.
your state representative.
I'll tell you what they told me. No, it may be possible to do.
Yeah.
You will get sued.
I know, if you'll see CNN, you're gonna, yeah, it's gonna be great.
So,
Tell Americans what they can do with their second homes, yeah, this is, yeah.
so just be aware, I would rather the state take on that liability than this city take on that
Right.
liability. So,
I'm
you
surprised
get
from
that-
you, Carl, really?
so you get the state to allow that as a fee rather than a property tax.
Sure.
If they define it that way and they do it, if we do it, we'll get challenged for
Okay.
adding a property tax. And dealing with the properties differently, which,
The state of
You can't.
Hawaii has a massive property tax increase if you are not a primary resident.
other,
It's like
other states
Almost
do.
4 times
Yeah.
the rate.
Other
that?
states,
Hawaii, the state of Hawaii
yeah,
does
Okay.
that,
Wow.
because they have so many housing issues on multiple islands.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you, if that's not your primary residence, you pay almost 4
pay
times property tax every
through
year.
the nose.
So anyways, I just wanna make sure we get the same
Yeah.
discussion, same. fees,
Elizabeth
same
has her
fees.
hand up.
Okay.
Thanks. I wanted to ask, because I do think they are related, because when we're talking about an impact fee for, for development for affordable housing, a lot of this is about the opportunity costs being foregone if you're going to charge a fee instead of creating the affordable housing. And it seems to me that residency is a similar issue where the opportunity cost of not being a resident means that we have to provide different housing so that we can house the people who want to be residents here, and that's a cost. So it seems like there could be a fee nexus there that's not a tax. That would be pretty straightforward. But I guess I take the mayor's point that maybe we don't want to be the ones to front the lawsuit money on that.
And the reason it's very different, and this is why it would get, is because we want that fee every year. What we're talking about
Yeah.
is a nexus to a building permit fee that's
Like a
created,
one-time.
and it's a
development fee.
one-time thing.
Yeah,
If we're going after those empty homes, it's yearly, and.
That's a good
where-
point.
That's
Okay.
where we're gonna get
Separate.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, you could prevail. But
Right.
you
You could.
will be sued.
How deep's your pockets for a lawsuit
Yep.
like that?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'd rather the state took that risk and let them challenge the state and let them define it.
So help me understand, is that the nexus study, is it something we write or put down or document we start creating? Or who-
No, no.
Sorry?
We put the RFP out for the
this would be
company.
consultant.
Yeah, for the consultant company would do it.
Would do it.
And we tried once for both, like Maggie said, and apparently what the idea is that we didn't get any action on it because we didn't have enough. So maybe we need to request you guys to,
Same budget, but
yeah.
only a nexus study?
exactly.
Yeah.
Let us
Maybe
use that
that
budget
works.
amount just for a nexus study and see if we might be able to get that. Not even saying we can, but at
Right,
least we could
just
try.
start there.
But it's obviously a priority.
Yeah,
for
Yeah.
all of us. And the roadblock is that nobody's bidding on it because there's nothing in it for them. They don't have enough money. So without raising the budget for it, then we're dead in the water.
Well, if it was for combined feasibility and nexus, so if we just say we're not doing feasibility, we're only doing a nexus study, then
Yeah.
maybe the budget is sufficient.
Right.
But maybe you, Maggie, could also like kind of suss it out with the consultants of like, are we gonna get any responses?
Yeah,
for
get
it?
away from
Still
the,
too low.
get away from the inclusionary.
Yeah, what if it was just a fee nexus study? I'm sure that they could get behind
I
that.
feel like we've already figured out feasibility on inclusionary zoning specifically, and
It's not feasible.
so I really like the idea of calling this what it actually is. And getting away from inclusionary zoning, because
Yeah.
we'll never actually adopt inclusionary zoning,
I like that.
the way that it's defined.
Agreed.
The risk of starting there, not raising the budget right now is that we just don't get any more applicants at all. And
We
then,
might be able to
Then we
flush
have
it out, though. There's some pretty standard consultants for zoning and planning type work in Washington State, and there's a way to have conversations with them before we. Send out the RFP.
Send it out.
Make sure that the budget is reasonable.
so then seems pretty clear which direction to go.
Yeah, so I
Please direct us.
want to double check with legal and make sure that I'm moving in the right path there.
Mhm.
Redraft the RFP. I might pull your brains in and make sure it reads okay.
Mhm.
And then, I'll double check with, the consultants that I know about out there and say, am I on the right track? Does this budget make sense? I know that, with Nexus, it involves a lot more legal type review.
Yep.
So sometimes that's why it's more expensive.
Yeah.
Because they're these consultants, but then they have to get legal to review, and usually sometimes they don't have a legal person on their team. So then
Is that something that we could have our own
Yeah.
attorney help with,
that's why I need to have.
so that we don't pay somebody else's legal fees?
Right, and we already got somebody on retainer to do that anyway, so,
Again.
Yeah. okay, let's go that route as far as, before we ask them for.
We'll find out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's do it. It's been in our top 3 for a while.
I love it. We're knocking it out. This is
Let's figure
great.
it out.
Is the direction clear then from us?
Yeah, it very much is. Thank you.
Just to make sure that I haven't formalized, so basically the request is to reconfigure, resubmit an RFP for just a nexus study, move away from inclusionary zoning and call it what it is, which is a fee program.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then obviously step in that would be consulting with legal, and then Carl, will you assist Maggie then on the city attorney who can assist with that? Okay. Great.
I mean, our attorney's gonna review everything anyways.
I'm gonna have a look
My
at it too,
employees,
get it.
they're-
This may
May
be
not
jump,
want to be the first.
jump in the gun, questions, but, the fee. Non-inclusionary zoning, if somebody's building their own single family home in town, would they be paying a fee for affordable housing?
Yeah.
Their primary residence?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the beauty of it. Like you said, because it stops the people doing less than 10 or whatever, it just, everybody pays.
There's no sidestepping anything. It just becomes a
Unless-
part of
unless-
what Leavenworth is and how we're trying to
An
fund.
affordable unit.
And yeah, unless it's affordable, like if
Yeah.
you were like, I'm going to place a deed restriction on my own home. So that it
Stays affordable.
stays affordable, a la amend housing and like partner with them on that,
Yeah.
and you could not pay the fee. I think that ADUs are exempt from this fee, right? Cause wasn't there something in the state rule about
Impact
you,
fee
you can't have,
more than 50%.
It's,
oh, okay. So you just, so they could still have, they could still pay the fee, but it would be a lower, but we talked about like, you know, do we want to include ADUs or,
So yeah, any effort to get into.
that would be the only,
right.
yeah,
Exemptions would there be?
Yeah.
Maybe
But
they
it would
don't
be-
have to
it would be
pay
pretty
if they
minimal
have a deed
markups for,
restriction
like-
that their ADU will never be a B and B,
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah,
It's always gonna be long-term housing.
would you say it again?
Oh, Allison was just talking about, opportunities for the ADU and whether or not this fee would apply to the construction of ADUs on people's properties. Cause we're gonna be, allowing 2 per property now, based on state law. And my suggestion was perhaps if people had a deed restriction that the ADU would never be short-term rented, that then they could potentially be exempt
Yeah.
for an ADU specifically, because they are creating additional.
Correct.
And those exemptions are, and talk of that can get real deep when it happens.
Yeah, because if they sell the property, then just that.
Well,
If
and
it's a
and-
deed restriction,
It
though,
runs with the
then
property.
it's done, yeah.
Yep, but I'm sure that the city doesn't have a department that's checking on all of the deeds to make sure that this is, and so there's a lot of added layers to this sort of thing, especially when you start.
does create more work, But
I
it
mean,
would be on
I'm-
title.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
it'll be there, it's just you guys have an enforcement
It would
link,
just, well, it would just have to, it would be another
Well,
task
Yeah.
in the ADU, in the B and B review process. It'd be like, oh, we also have to do a title, title
Look and
check.
see if you can
Yeah.
have one.
Yeah.
See if, yeah. and-
Totally.
Yeah.
Seems like
Doable.
just one more checklist.
That's easy though, because an applicant for a B and B, for them to actually have to just provide a title report as well, that's not extra work
That's
for
not-
the city.
No,
That's.
that's just extra work for the
That's the
applicant,
applicant.
yep, that's fair. Okay.
Great, so the next one, wanted to get a little bit more discussion on was the parking, primarily the off-street parking in commercial zone. So we've had some internal discussion here, but I think that we'd like to kind of get a little bit more guidance on kind of what would be preferred in terms of, is there a comfort level on what sort of fee structure? And also kind of get a little bit better understanding of what are the short-term plans and long-term plans for parking in the city. So if we're, in theory, collecting a fee, what is that going towards? So we can kind of,
Parking garage.
okay, so that's
I
long-term.
mean, this fee would also just be associated with all of the fees that we collect for parking. It would all go into the parking fee, is how I've kind of envisioned it. Because we wouldn't have two different parking fees, because everything's gonna go towards creating parking. So this would just be added into the parking fee that we already have, that would then pay for parking solutions, like parking garage.
And we've got the way to figure out how much parking a building would have if they weren't in that exempt area, right? So, right.
Yeah, it could be a calculus, the number of stalls that they would
They
normally
would
have to
normally have to
develop, and that
develop.
would have a per stall cost.
Yeah,
that they
and,
would pay.
and I would, I don't know what sort of a fee you guys can stomach for that, but I would hope that it's a high one. Because a fee in lieu of parking, a one-time especially fee in lieu of parking, because it's not gonna be a
Well,
yearly.
think of all the commercial space you can develop if you're not developing parking, right?
Yeah, I just feel like
Yeah.
that's one of those ones that the fee in lieu of parking, however you guys calculate that per stall, should be,
About to get you a stop.
quite a bit, quite a bit.
Yeah.
It should be something that you look at and actually think, oh boy, should I put parking? I mean, obviously, there's gonna be some people that can't even get parking, like I think of, the Evans LLC that purchased the vacant lot downtown next to Yodel. How do you get a car there? You can't, you can't access it through the back realistically, because you have to drive over neighboring property, and you can't access it from the front because we have Front Street closed. So that's gonna be, they're forced into something like that right away. But other people who could create parking, I feel like that's something that we, should.
Well, I think this dovetails with our downtown zoning that, right, currently does not require off-street parking. And I think that, and this is up to a discussion, but I think that we need to eliminate the exemption of developing parking in the central district. Because I think that that is creating issues for us as well. It's creating more parking issues for us to manage into the future. Where if you are going to build to the boundaries of your lot, regardless of where you are in the downtown commercial zones, you have to provide parking or you have to pay into this.
Yeah.
The central district, they do zero lot development, right? They never are required to create parking, but as they continue to develop and redevelop and everything gets bigger and higher, we are creating the need for more parking and not developing it. So I think this needs to couple with eliminating that out of our code.
Because right now there's an exemption, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right now in the central district, we don't require the development of parking ever
That's
when
right.
you're developing. a lot.
Unless
And I
you
don't think that that's working well for us.
unless the development is over 10,000 square feet. So that has resulted in at least one 9,998 square foot.
The Ryan House.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It stayed right at the threshold.
This is the sidestepping that we discussed earlier, right? Like developers are very keen.
So the idea
And
is
we did
instead
not
of-
have
yeah.
a fee in place.
Right.
To,
Right.
Okay.
you know.
That's why I think this is a really opportune time to like.
Yeah, so that's
dovetail
the plan is that instead of saying the central commercial district is exempt from parking for development under 10,000, it would be like the central commercial parking district has the same parking requirements as all the other districts. There's a table you go through to be like, for this use, this is how many spaces are required per square foot, what have you, and you determine how many spaces are needed. If you cannot provide the parking on the site, this is the fee that you pay for the parking.
Yeah.
If it
Or
can't be
choose
provided.
not to, but here's the still the thing.
Yeah, Elizabeth?
Oh, hey, I had, one point of question about the parking fee and consolidating everything to the parking, what do we call it, budget or bucket of things that can't, the only thing that can come out is parking maintenance. And that is, I was just wondering if we wanted to make this consolidation, if we're adding a bunch of money to it, if we wanted to make the expenditure of that money just slightly more flexible to be able to spend money on transportation to and from the central business district at large, including parking off street, but maybe also potentially providing other things like circulatory, shuttles or other access to Amtrak or something else that would help with access to the CBD that doesn't just limit us to producing parking, because at some point we will not be able to produce parking until we build when we build the giant garage, maybe. But once that is built, then there will not be any more, it's not like you can just add a floor to it. And so I'm just wondering if we want to make that expenditure more flexible.
Can I comment on that? By the way, yeah, once the $30 million parking structure is built, it's gonna take us 25 years to pay it off. So there, in the 25 years, these monies will be used towards that. I think parking is the most clear-cut bucket of any of the tax solutions we have in this city, right?
Well, and it's an
If it's parking,
enterprise
it's
fund,
parking.
and it has boundaries.
Yeah.
What are do the boundaries exclude any other transportation stuff? Like,
Especially until you build that parking garage, I guess. So, because
Town that
Yeah.
Link
Yeah,
manages. So the city doesn't necessarily need to be in the business of operating transportation as far as shuttling people around, because Link Transit's already doing it for us. And as they continue to get more taxes over time, they'll be able to increase their shuttle service for us as well.
And shuttling feasibility when traffic is crazy bad, becomes, less useful. Let's say.
sure, I'm not trying to say that we ever want to operate transit, but we could pay Link Transit to operate service to Amtrak station, do something. There's a lot of other things that you can do that provide access to the CBD that don't involve parking, and parking itself is pretty limited.
Yeah.
Link Transit has multiple services that can take you to non-route type locations within their large service area in Chelan and Douglas County. Like you can call it
Until
dark.
6 p.m. Which the train comes after that, but
Valid point, I know there was also some discussion about, converting some of the city-owned land to temporary parking facilities. Is that still on the docket, and would these funds potentially go to offset some of that cost? Or is this money, in your mind, only going towards the big ticket item?
Will you say that again?
It would go towards, it could potentially go towards anything that's parking.
Parking,
right? Like that.
Yeah,
I don't think
that's-
that restricted.
okay.
It's very clear.
Just as we kind of formulate this idea and work through some of the different levers we can pull, we want to think short-term, mid-term, long-term.
Mhm.
And what does this look like, in terms of the scale of development in town? I know we even talked about potentially, is this just a one-time fee, or could this potentially be an annual fee? In lieu of, owning parking, so. Just all these different variables we're trying to work through. It's just helpful to know kind of what all is off the table.
Drew, could you kind of, I didn't quite catch all that. you restate that, what you were asking, like the land swap thing, or?
No, I mean, so I heard there was discussion at one point of converting existing land the city owns to parking.
Oh, okay.
And so there's gonna be fees or costs associated with doing that, right?
You know, like
Converting it, maintaining it or whatever.
Okay,
So would these fees be applicable to that? Do we need to consider that in our math?
Yeah.
Or potential, math for acquiring new land and then developing it to parking as a short-term stopgap.
Mhm.
Cause you're not gonna turn around and build a $30 million parking garage next year. It's gonna take some time, right?
Could you give a description of what you were saying? As far as city land, what city land?
The city purchased the land or had the land that the espresso shop was on, right?
Yes.
Right. So what's the plan for that land right now?
Parking, and now it's temporary parking, right?
Temporary parking, so that's an
Looks
example.
pretty permanent to me.
Well, it's gonna be, yeah,
That might be
knows
where the
what-
parking
yes,
garage lands, we
right,
don't know yet.
including that, so we'll
So-
see, but for now, it was a temporary, it was a quick, put it in, get it going, put it up, but until we know what that permanent looks like.
I think
So-
that the parking fund could fund everything that you've been asking
Yeah,
about, because it would facilitate creating parking solutions.
Right.
I don't think that it's so narrow that that is an impossibility.
Okay. Yeah, I want to, part of our calculus, we want to make sure we're addressing every step.
I feel like a parking shuttle, and not a replacement for, transit, but in essence, it's just makes the run from our parking lots that are farther out, something that's Varian, would probably fall under this as well, and I don't see why that shouldn't be a consideration as we go forward. Elizabeth's point, I think, is valid. I've thought about it for years, that it is, you need alternative parking spaces, like during big festival times, if we wanted to use the Skivo parking lot, which is not city owned, but if there's other places where we can find parking available and we have the ability to shuttle people efficiently, I don't think that calling the transit service is the right answer.
No.
So having a few shuttles could be.
But like you said, I've actually counted, you said parking 17 times just then.
Yeah.
That would fall into the parking fund. Seems like community item. Seems like if you're using the word parking that much, we could probably pay it out of the parking fund.
I think that's our
Right? Yeah.
question, is like, how restricted is this parking fund, and can transportation related to parking maybe?
Yeah, it can, but again, the goal the past 12 years is to build a parking garage, and we're not gonna fund it with 100% of those parking monies each year. It's a lot of money. We'll get a bond, we'll get some monies, but it's not restricted. It's, like I said, parking 17%. With the shuttle, I mean, definitely, it's not restricted. I'm not trying to like shut it down and be like just parking, but it's parking. I think this is a really, if you're
Yeah.
talking about parking, it's parking. Chapter 14.2 off-street loading and parking. If parking's in the title of what we're talking about, we should probably go to the parking fund. And we can do some stuff with it. I think just makes it easy.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the clarification and guidance we're looking for on that. So I appreciate the feedback.
The other thing we're gonna look at with parking is, the whole section on when parking is required is a little outdated as well, and so just making sure that that lines up with our district use chart. Because some of the uses that are listed there are, I mean, if you read it, it's interesting, but just we'll just do the cleanup as well with that, vote to make sure that whatever's listed in the use chart has an appropriate, parking.
Just gonna pull all the threads. Address everything. Couple of parking side quests.
So, anyway, and also look at, snow storage required for parking as well. Because right now, there's no calculation, nothing, so that was another thing that was listed as something. So, we got a lot.
Cool. And I guess just the last question on that is, what's the risk appetite for how aggressive we could be with the fee we recommend? We could be very, very aggressive.
Be aggressive.
I'm hearing aggressive, so I think that unless we hear otherwise, we'll kind of start.
Do we even?
We haven't really figured out numbers yet, but just before we do that, it helps to know.
Yeah.
Can we,
I don't
we
know if
we
we
can kind of,
When you say fee for parking, are you talking about what they have to pay if they don't?
If they don't-
The fee in lieu of, that's correct.
Lieu of.
The fee in lieu, that's
Okay.
correct.
Lieu of.
I think to start with, what is it cost?
Right.
That's just a really obvious starting point to me, and then we.
Which is more than doubled in the last year.
Yeah,
But if it costs $70,000 per stall
Yeah.
for a parking
Yeah.
garage, then there's your. That's the number, I agree.
I don't think that's fair, because a parking garage is super expensive to build because it's, you know, structurally engineered. And usually surface parking lots are not. I don't want the fee for stalls to be so high that they're like, fine, we're putting a surface parking lot in next to our building. Cause that's also not the highest and best use of the land in our central district.
But I mean, for $70,000,
what I mean?
they're not gonna,
They're not gonna waste the land.
no.
Yeah.
They're still gonna
It's a
maximize.
starting, Right, so
maximize.
you say how aggressive to be, it should be accurate, I think, be accurate, and then.
Yeah.
We can decide like, ooh, that's,
Yeah,
we can then debate.
well, obviously you have discretion to amend that before you pass it, but
And Shannon has, sorry,
we just wanted, but I think that helps. And I think we were thinking that as well. I just wanted to make sure that's a good starting point. So.
and Shannon has good data too, and I have a couple of years data, but like that lost opportunity. Right, of the cost that we would be taking in, the revenue lost, right?
Great. Yeah, the next one on the list, your HB 1337, we did public hearing last month, so this will be on your docket next month. We spent, good 3.5 months on this one, worked through a lot of the new ones, so we feel pretty good about this. It's well received on your discussion. And then
Do you wanna talk about the draft language now, or?
yeah, and if there are any questions or if you need points you'd like to discuss, I mean, I don't really want to read through the whole thing here.
No one showed up, right? Is that the one? There were no pushback,
There was not a constituent that showed up to the meeting, correct?
That doesn't mean they won't show up.
No, no.
Hey,
I don't.
For the record, for the second time in the record.
No,
make
I
it
actually,
clear
I actually think that
nobody
this is
showed
a
up.
great time, and I don't need to spend a ton of time on your ADU code amendments, but since you're here, it's the easiest way to understand why you chose language that you did.
Okay.
Yeah. Under section C, you guys added the language where it says, when 2 ADUs are proposed, the single family unit shall require only 1 off-street parking space regardless of its square footage. Can you give me a backstory on why you chose that language?
Where are we on that? What page is that?
sorry, what?
I can completely, let me go.
James,
Because usually we have a trigger for 2 stalls depending upon square footage. And so say it's a pretty big house, but they also have enough land to build ADUs, they can diminish their single family requirement to 1, have an ADU, have one of their single family residential stalls. And then if they're doing 2 ADUs, to only have to add 1 more stall. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, it reduces the parking requirement basically because 4 parking spaces is like a whole parking lot. And we didn't want to have vast areas of parking
And if I remember correctly, it
and
specifically
make it infeasible.
says 2 ADUs because we thought that if they're gonna build 2 ADUs, that's 2 extra housing units. We don't wanna put an extra parking thing on them, especially when 2 ADUs were being built, if I remember correctly. So it was almost like
Benefit.
And-
it was kind of an incentive or something that would allow some flexibility for space wise. Because if you are gonna build 2 ADUs on a smaller lot, all of a sudden these things get real tight. And so we thought that we liked the idea of 2 ADUs, so that was like, I don't wanna call it an incentive, but it's a flexibility that would allow more people
Yeah.
the ability to do it.
Removing a barrier.
I think based on what I remember the discussion being was also that, yeah, it was a barrier. Most people will build probably more, yeah, you typically, if you have a garage, that's a parking space too, but it just. It offered that little bit of flexibility. Most people know they can't park on the streets here in the winter. Hopefully would think about parking when they build or when they rent, but again, I'm trying to start backwards now, I'm sorry. But I remember the conversation being like, we were just trying to remove some barrier, because we don't have mass transit here, but it would give some flexibility instead of Oh, these ones, when you hit over 1,500 square feet, you have to have 2 parking spaces, but if you're 1,500 square feet or less, you need 1.
I think it's also
You have some houses that are 16, 17, they have to have 2 versus.
the state law said if you're within a certain distance to a mass transit. We don't have a mass transit, so it's kind of our way backwards engineering for future proofing it. Of saying, should we get to a space, place where we have mass transit, then we kind of have that built in already.
I like the idea of incentivizing and, I guess my question comes from more of like is this based in reality? Most people don't have just one car at their home, right? If you have more than one person living in the home, you very likely have more than one vehicle. So is this setting us up for some challenges by not also having the code language based in reality?
Somebody's gonna have to park in the street.
But they
Well,
can't. in
yeah,
winter.
That's what I'm saying, to your
Yeah.
point, like, somebody's gonna have to, like, if we're in the summer, like, oh, I didn't
Well,
realize.
unless you have someone like Lucas doesn't have a car, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, Lucas,
3 people,
a
2
person,
cars.
yeah, a person like Lucas could rent one of these EDUs, but the single family home would still have 3 parking spots, or, you know, 1 extra, or 2 parking spots plus 1 for the additional ADU.
There's also a lot of. There's a lot of situations in town where you just make it work, like there's on Park Street, there's little houses, there's like basically duplexes, but both units are under 1,200, so they only require 2 spaces. There are always 4 vehicles. Their driveway, it's like driveway, Jenga or
Yeah.
whatever, you know? And like in the summer, they're just like, oh, we can just park on the street and that makes our lives easier. And in the winter, they do like weird parking Jenga all winter and they just like make it work. So I feel like- Yeah, everybody's blocking each other
Yeah.
in, but I feel like it's, you know, hopefully anybody developing this would know what they're getting into.
Right.
Essentially, and be like, I can't rent to somebody that has 2 vehicles for this ADU because there's simply just not enough parking.
Well, those people wouldn't rent it. because You say you don't have a parking spot.
Yeah, you'd be like, you only get 1 parking space. if
What
you're
they do,
renting.
and we have a giant parking problem on the street in the wintertime. With every place with 2 ADUs, but since we don't have any places with 2 ADUs, really,
It's all the impact.
it's all like, you know.
Space, the lots that could actually develop a second ED or not. So we don't think that's gonna be a big enough of a
Sure.
lever to offset that need.
And this is only with 2 ADUs, so.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But we say that if the ADU is under a certain size, that we're not requiring. parking lots.
No, we're saying that, so normally if a single family home is under 1,500 square feet, you only need 1 parking space. And if it's over 1,500 square feet, you need 2 parking spaces for the primary
For the
residence.
primary.
ADUs is always 1 parking space because they're under
Okay,
1,200.
so-
So we're saying if you have 2 ADUs, you only need 3 spaces total. So even if you had a 2,000 square foot home and then 2 ADUs that are 800 square feet each or whatever, you would only need 3 parking spaces.
Hmm.
So if somebody in one of those 3 units
Right.
had 2 cars, then you'd have to get creative. Yeah.
They can park in the same driveway or whatever, but usually
Yeah.
that's all they got.
So all we're doing is
Yeah.
reducing the main unit parking number to 1 if you have 2 ADUs. That's what that
Instead of
verbiage is,
2.
instead of having to have 2 for the main unit.
I think it's reasonable, and it's unprecedented. Do you count garages as parking space?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Got
there'll
it.
probably be a lot of situations where like you have a 2-car garage
Right.
and you have an ADU on top.
Yeah.
And then you have a 3rd parking space somewhere, but then you have 4 cars and people are just double parking
Yeah.
the garage in or whatever, like you can park in the driveway in the garage.
I really have reservations about this bill, period, just because, for 3 reasons. I mean, I know the state's mandating it, I suppose it's gonna happen, it's already happened. But, and still say this is Leavenworth. We have 3 things that, in my mind, that should be an exception for us in this town. One of them is the fire situation. One of them is the traffic that's gonna come. And one of them is the price of housing. This is supposed to reduce housing costs, because we build more housing. What I've seen, since I came back in '94, all the things you've done, which has the best intentions, has not reduced. Got us anywhere near, well, I guess that's an overstatement, it's got us nearer, but. I just have that, adding another ADU to one, we already have one. To me, does not solve a dang thing. And I think it complicates things with traffic, affordability, and fire situations. And so, I know that, I don't think that I can change that, but that's my issues, so.
I disagree with you, but I don't wanna hash out right
Yeah,
here, but
it's already passed.
I don't go
Yeah,
over
let's do
how
that.
I feel like that's not true, but.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good, we'll do that.
Anything with the verbiage that we have in here, as far as that, you guys have any more questions on that, or,
On that section,
yes, or no, just continuing on through
Oh,
past
the-
past
oh.
C.
road improvements shall not require a condition of permitting an accessory dwelling unit. What does that really mean?
Could you tell us where
Is
you're at?
that
Tell us where
main
you're at
road
real quick.
improvements, or is that alley improvements, or
I think that's any.
That was.
anything? Is that a state law?
Yeah.
Cool, I mean, I really like it, it just was brief and I didn't know.
It's because it was, we just added exactly what they said.
Okay.
That's why it's a full ad, just get it in.
Talk as everybody roundtable about, letter I. That's what I did, because we went round and round about lot coverage. And, this was one thing I was asked to change, and I haven't gotten to go. Anyway, I took a stab at it, and so I think this one might end up being changed again, so I'd love everyone's opinion on that.
Which one, Maggie? Sorry.
Letter I, so lot coverage may be increased to accommodate accessory dwelling units on the following, on an individual building lot as follows. So this backstory on this, we were talking about how do we incentivize people to build additional ADUs, and especially when lot coverage is 35% and some of our lots are small. So the planning commission, at first we went round and round about, if you do 2 ADUs, then you can increase your lot coverage. And then we went back to, how about we increase lot coverage with each ADU rather than just with the second. So that's how this language came into play. So it talks about maximum lot coverage being for the underlying zoning district for the single family dwelling unit. And then with the first ADU on the lot, increasing it by 5%. And then with the second ADU on the lot, increasing it by another 5%. I added some language in here that the intent of this code is not to allow the single family resident to increase in size. Like if you already have a house and an ADU and you want to build another ADU, it's not giving you an incentive to make your house bigger. It's just for to add additional dwelling units. Yes, well, it's an attached ADU. I'm gonna define ADU. I have a whole definition section that's not, I forgot to attach here, but it's all state law definitions that we're going to adopt as well. And then I gave an example as well, before there. So it is a big change. I mean, but when you look at the size of our lots, it's really not that much more lot coverage, and so. We're talking 100.
Yeah.
Square.
I mean, for a 6,000 square foot lot, it would be 600 more covered square feet. For that second ADU, 300 for the first. Just allowing more flexibility. If you're gonna build an ADU, which we think is a good idea, you get a little bit more lot coverage, just, for flexibility. And if you're gonna build that second unit, which we really want, again, you're just gonna get that slight little bump that helps you, Allison knows much better than me, but, for the design and how you make things work on the lot, that sort of stuff is gonna be super helpful.
And I think part of the reason they were looking at lot coverage here, they have been planning commission, when we were discussing it, is because when we reduced our building height just a year or two years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
To 30 feet instead of 35, so it's really not the ability to go up. So people do need to go out, and so to give them the flexibility to add additional units.
Lot coverage is already one of the biggest roadblocks to people adding ADUs.
Biggest what, Allison?
One of the biggest roadblocks to adding an ADU
Okay,
already,
right.
is lot coverage.
pretty low number to begin with.
Yeah.
Did I miss something that we reduced the height limit to 30 feet instead of 35?
Years ago.
Well, I was here when we did it at 35. That was but that's
So it went from,
40, well, is that
no,
35
it went
halfway
from
up?
like, the height limit was 35 and it's defined as the midpoint on a gable or the high point on a shed roof. And we switched it to the height limit is 30 feet, same definition, midpoint on a gable, high point on a shed roof. But the peak of a gable can still not exceed 35.
Oh, the peak, yeah.
Because you
Oh,
measure
okay.
the height limit to the midpoint of a gable.
So as it stands now, it's halfway up the gable, it's 30 feet. Is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Yeah, then I guess there wasn't a change. All right.
Well, it was a change because it used to be 35 feet to the midpoint of the gable.
Okay.
And there was no limit to how high
You go
peak
past.
of the
Right,
peak of a gable roof could be.
right. And now,
Like shed roofs, it's a simple calculation. But now we lowered the limit as measured to the midpoint of a gable and put a cap
on the,
on the peak
Yep.
height.
the ridge cap can't be higher than 35 feet.
Yeah. So it was definitely a reduction.
So with so with this one, you put two ADUs on a house, almost half your land can be covered by structures. Right, 45%?
It doesn't change the setbacks. And on a small lot, the required setbacks account for like
A lot of room.
40%, it's like 40 to 45% of your lot area on a very small lot. So,
Doesn't change the movie standards either, those are still required.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question about under H, and I'm not familiar with the verbiage in our municipal code, chapter 21.9, but this.
I couldn't find the definition in there.
What
Maybe
is it?
I'm
Of a
just
major
not looking
transit stop?
correct.
Yeah, what
Maybe
is
I'm
a
just
major-
not looking
That's
correct.
we don't
defined,
have
that's
any.
all defined by the state.
So
That's,
the bus stop, not a major.
no,
transit
not,
stop.
Elizabeth could speak to this. Elizabeth, can you help us out?
Or the definition of a
I
mass
forgot to
transit.
attach the definition, part of this will be all the definitions.
Oh, so it's not in there yet.
It went through our public hearing, I just forgot to attach it to this. So there is a definition of book over this.
Oh, gotcha,
And a
okay.
Different chapter of the code, that's my fault. It's
Gotcha,
in-
okay.
but the reference to like LMC 21, whatever, like that doesn't exist yet. We're adding.
That was
That
what I was
definition.
Gotcha.
confused about, because I was looking for, well, what's our definition of mass
Yeah, I
transit?
can pull it up. I'm
Or
sorry.
major transit stop.
That was part of the hearing and I forgot to attach that.
That's another like state rule.
Okay.
And we talked about eliminating that entirely because we do not currently have a major transit stop in Leavenworth per the state definition. But then we decided to leave it in just in case in the future a major transit stop was constructed in Leavenworth, then the state required code is already in
So I'm
place.
curious how they do define a major.
Yeah.
Because there's.
Here,
other-
Elizabeth will tell you all about it.
Yeah.
This is her
Yeah.
specialty.
Love it.
Well, the state basically told the counties to identify their major transit stops based on a definition that I think was a 15-minute or 20-minute combined headway. And according to that, we actually have a major transit stop because during some times of service, Link Transit does service us that frequently. But the problem is that because the county didn't identify it as such, it's not officially recognized as one. And obviously it can change over time. And so I think it's important that we have that verbiage in there, because that could, the county's recognition of that could change and be updated at any point in time. But the state, based on the state guidance, that we probably do have a major transit stop, and it probably will be recognized at some point.
What's the frequency requirement?
I think it's either 15 or 20 minutes, but I think we looked it up when we were reviewing this, and there were, like, depending on how you averaged out the service periods for Link Transit service, we would qualify.
Yeah, I would think that we would qualify, especially since we have 3 different routes in town now.
Yep.
Yeah,
My concern is the benefit of having this is that we want people to have increased density near transit. But if somebody can argue that something exists that doesn't exist right now and be able to get away with not putting a
Yeah,
parking
good.
spot in, I don't want it to be used the other way around, just to, you know, skirt parking requirement.
Yeah, well, the county needs to officially come out and declare it.
Right.
And so right now there isn't. She's just saying that in theory, they could define it as such today, but
Maggie's got something on the screen for us.
So this is the RCW definition of major transit stop, so. A stop on a high capacity transportation system funded or expanded under the provisions of this RCW. Commuter rail stops, stops on rail or fixed guideway systems, including transitways, stops on bus rapid transit routes or routes that run on high occupancy vehicle lanes, or stops for a bus or other transit mode providing actual fixed route service at intervals of at least 15 minutes for at least 5 hours during the peak hours of operation on weekdays. So that's that last.
That's that frequency.
Certainly sounds like that
So
qualifies.
then, and based on, they've mapped all these at a state level, and we don't have any mapped here, but that's not to say that can't change based on this definition. So they would have to qualify under this definition. So
And we have to have this because this is part of
This is
HB
state.
1110, right? This is our forced on
Yeah,
1337. So, yeah.
So we can't.
We can't change, we can't not have it, so we might as well have it. And you're right, if somebody was to challenge us, but as it sits right now, I believe I agree with Drew, where the county has not put us in, and we don't, that 15 minutes for 5 hours during peak, 5 days a week, we don't fit that definition yet. So I think that we would be okay to leave it in there. Okay, just my thought.
And regardless if it's there or not, it's there.
Right,
Because it's there. It's
Yeah.
Correct.
And we, I mean, we thought it was a good clause. Anyways, if we do get to a state where there's enough transportation that you don't have to rely on a car to go to work and run your basic errands, then ideally, yeah, we'd like to have less parking. But we don't have to have more cars on the road.
Don't we qualify
as a developer that is wanting to
Yeah,
do more of
The
less.
the market's gonna tell the developer, can you build a house without a parking spot?
are we saying we don't qualify for a major transit stop?
No, not according to the county's definition. Yeah.
We're on the second busiest highway in the state, but how come we don't qualify?
Because you need to qualify for a major, on A, B, C, D, or E at the bottom there, Zeke, and the one that we're stuck up on is E, where it says that we need a fixed route at intervals of at least 15 minutes for at least 5 hours during peak hours of operation on weekdays. And we don't have bus schedules that fit that number yet. But Elizabeth says that according to the county, we might be closer than we originally thought, so maybe it could happen sooner rather than later, but as of this moment, we, according to RCW and to Shoreline County. we don't
Weekdays
qualify
is
yet.
the caveat, right? We
Yeah.
probably covered on the weekends. We would.
Right.
I don't know, I don't know the bus service routes around here time wise, but yeah.
Yeah, qualify all of
Link
them?
Transit's more focused on weekdays for commuter traffic,
Absolutely.
but we're not at those intervals yet unless we have some overlap in different routes. Wenatchee probably hits that.
But I think that's
Sure.
one route. Would have.
For impact fees, I think this is the last section in this ADU code. Impact fees, I assume that's what we were talking about before, the inclusionary zoning that we're now transitioning to impact fees. Before this comes to the city council for approval, do we need to agree on terminology to make sure that it's the same that we're seeking in the RFP? Is it, are we just keeping it simple, impact fee? Is it a housing impact fee? Like,
I think-
how do we wanna?
Well, Maggie,
it's kind of
any impact, so like your permit fees and
Oh,
like
okay.
utility development, like utility fees.
Flying on the utility.
So the normal, like, you know, for a single family residence. Or currently for an ADU that has a separate utility connection, you pay like $16,000 or whatever to connect to a city
Right.
water and sewer, and. This is from the state law that says you're not allowed to charge. More than 50%.
I think my question to me made it seem like the language is not quite clear yet.
This I think was again from the state, and I think that this is their way of making sure the counties don't backwards engineer their way out of this.
Well, I'm not suggesting we backwards.
You wanna
anyway.
change the word impact to just all fees or fees?
No, I
Permitting
think it needs to
fees.
be expanded a little bit more so that like the layman reading it knows that they
So you just
don't have to pay the full price when they're developing an ADU.
It's
So
still
that,
accessory dwelling units.
I wasn't
Well,
exactly sure what that meant.
Okay, that's fair.
Some of that.
That was a copy of the structure law, so we could define what impact fees are, maybe in our definition. But I don't wanna make that.
That's fine, yeah, just a way for people to know exactly what that means.
The intent of that, right, is that the municipality can't say, okay, we're gonna adopt this because we have to. But we're gonna charge you $50,000 to get hookups.
Right, for sure.
So I think they'll have to.
Disincentivizing it.
Yeah, right.
Right away.
Okay, they're building like they're.
What you give with one hand, you take back with the other.
This is development fee,
Yeah.
if there's a traffic impact fee, if
Oh,
there's a
Yeah.
housing impact fee, affordable housing impact fee. That we
Yeah.
have to charge more than half of that for it.
Mhm.
So I can try to clarify.
Clarification on that sounds, I hear where Dan's coming from, I can see that, but
Defining what impact fees are.
it's great.
So that's something that we do in like our rate and fee schedule instead of
Definition.
having to do it in our definition.
Like listing out what all the impact fees are.
Fees.
That part of it.
What's easiest for staff?
And then you guys have a list of it and everybody knows itemized what, so you could just, you know.
Even if it was a duplicate of like.
Totally. That's a great idea.
But I worry about it. So, and we do that all the time where we're in our rate fee schedule. Throughout the year.
I also think, I like your idea too, because if at some point, you know, those who are drafting this are no longer working at the city, it's still already clear to people how they're implementing it, because it's very clear what those fees are.
And as long as it's updated every time your fees are updated, then it stays current.
Yeah.
Okay, good call out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for the extra time on ADUs, guys.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure.
Hopefully it's really good to do this because they're gonna start getting built, okay?
Yeah.
Not only-
I mean, if we can create more housing units in Leavenworth, infill housing units, that would be awesome.
Maybe you did a study on the current use and there was a fairly decent percentage of long-term rental, yeah.
I have that in a slideshow that I would share with them next.
Oh,
Cool.
great, yeah.
Awesome.
So the good news is it's actually doing better than
Yeah.
that, so that's exciting. Okay, so, yeah, that was inclusionary zoning. I'm sorry, that was HB 3037. Last one was triplexes. So this was, I know, on the very bottom of your priority list. In a lot of ways, doing this one is just changing some of the semantics from the second ADU. Very, very easy for us to kind of copy paste what we just did. So we were.
It'll be really similar to attached ADU. I mean, it's like the same
Exchange
thing.
it 2 or 3
Yeah,
words, and I think it's the same.
yeah.
So, we were actually gonna take this up next, because right there, it's sitting on a T for us, so we were gonna just attack it.
Can you explain to the guy,
Yeah.
what is the special, what's special about triplexes? Like, why is this,
Right now, they're not allowed unless they're in multifamily.
So we're talking about.
But
making them
because
allowed
the
in
state's gonna
single
require us to have a single family and allow 2 additional ADUs, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
In a residential district that's not multifamily.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
But the tri doesn't require one to be bigger than the other or have primary use.
Right.
over
Yeah,
the other.
right.
which does, the fabric of the neighborhood is affected by that. I have a triplex across the street from me that is the most boxy unimagined thing that you can put on a lot,
I have one on my block too,
and I don't want those.
but it's extra housing.
It is, I know, but if you keep it to where they have to conform to some aesthetics, which I, is part of the discussion, right?
It would also require people to tear down existing to build triplexes, since there's not a lot of vacant. So there's, I mean, there is that, like, this, 2 ADUs is more infill housing, triplexes could happen, but in the way that they would happen, wouldn't be infill. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's not like, built up neighborhoods. I mean, it could happen, obviously, but and I haven't just looked at it, but I'm interested to see what feasibility, construction cost wise is to build one or two ADUs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I mean, it doesn't seem like people have a lot of money laying around just to go ahead and throw two structures up in their backyard or tear down their existing structure to build a triplex, right? So while I do agree with you, they are, some of the triplexes in Leavenworth are, not very aesthetically pleasing from the exterior. You know, it's one of those things that we're gonna have to really look at. Period.
But good call out. We'll definitely bring up aesthetics in our discussion and see if there's anything we can define.
It sounds like all of you are would like to have design standards for triplexes.
You could
Get that.
definitely add the design standards to take care of your box.
Yeah, and it makes that, you know, hierarchy of
Articulation part.
structures, you know, make it feel more normal neighborhood, you know?
Yeah.
Which, if that's what we wanna maintain, I mean,
I think that that's really important, an important call out to specifically in the feedback we've been getting from the community over the last couple of years is aesthetics in single family residential zones is really important to people because that's where a lot of our historical development is. And, you know, boxy triplexes, I mean, I have one close to my house. I love that there's more housing, but it doesn't fit in with the surrounding homes in the neighborhood. And I think when we're thinking about this from the point of view where we're going to be potentially accepting this into single family zoning versus multifamily where it has historically been constructed, that we need to take into account some more aesthetic requirements.
I like that idea, for sure.
Why, I would ask, why are we considering triplexes when you got duplexes and ADUs? Why do you consider a triplex?
Well,
It's somewhat semantics, but basically it allows the same idea to get built, but just touchy. Really the difference.
It's more efficient.
It's more efficient. better use
It's
of
less
land.
costly. It's more, it's cheaper to build a triplex than it is to build a duplex and an ADU or a single family residence with and two ADUs.
Yeah.
but
I
the
guess my attitude is like, my thinking is, I'm more important, the landscape in the neighborhood is more important to me than the efficiency of the building. If they're allowed already to build a duplex or two ADUs, there's your housing, you've met what you're after. Put in a triplex, I think is not one of the missions that I'm interested in as a.
But you're interested in housing, Zeke, so that's irony, right?
That development.
So
Well,
Yeah, you also like
The-
affordability and efficiency means cheaper.
Yeah,
That it's gonna.
this allows for more affordable units.
And if
to be
you
on the
address,
market.
and if you address it with some design standards that tries to get it, fit in, you know, you gotta remember that single family housing is a relatively new concept. Lots of communities were built up with try, do, quad, whatever, all mixed in
sure,
until much later. And so you can make it work. There's,
that's my concern. I'm talking about what is existing now in the neighborhood landscape. All your arguments are firm, but I'm just saying it has an impact on the landscape of the neighborhood, and that's where you're getting a pushback. And if you don't really, how critical is it to build triplexes when you've already allowed what we've allowed?
It's more affordable.
it's, so the
Well,
housing
wow.
action plan. This was 6 years ago when
Yeah.
they did the last housing action plan.
2015, I think, something like that.
10
Or was
years
it more?
ago?
Then? Maybe 18.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Whenever it was, this was like one of their top recommendations, which is why it keeps coming up on the docket. And we've addressed a lot of their other recommendations, and this is like cottage housing, you know, was a recommendation, all that stuff. So this is just another option, because basically all those things that the housing action plan recommended that we look into, like cottage housing, et cetera, is just the more options you have, the more likely some of them will actually get used,
so,
you know? Because, you know, maybe there's a lot where they're like, oh, this is a pretty big lot and we could fit like 3 cute little triplexes on there. And if it's a triplex, you know, maybe each unit is 1,400 square feet and they could be condominiumized so that those could have 3 separate owners. Versus, and that each unit would cost less than if they had put a duplex. You know, those, you know, so maybe they, in a triplex, each unit would sell for, you know, 350,000 instead of if it was a duplex, maybe they would still be like 500,000 or something, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Versus the main difference between the two ADUs that we're already allowing and a triplex is the ADUs are like size limited. And if they're detached, that limits your options of separating, of having separate ownership. Versus if you build a triplex, like there's a firewall in the middle and you can condominiumize that or have separate ownership more easily if it's a triplex.
So that's the difference between, two attached ADUs and a triplex. Besides that, with two attached ADUs, your square footage is limited on the two ADUs versus the main structure, the main unit, and then triplexes could be all the same size.
Yep.
And they would have to have firewall separation.
Correct. But they would still have to conform to setbacks and the design standards and, right, and WUI and all these things, so. So it's not like, it's not like, you know, Wild West, people just build whatever they want to, everything would have to stay the same, it's
Right.
just that triplex word would allow single buildings as opposed to multiple buildings.
And you know, we're aiming for cute little townhouses, not the like on West Whitman where all you see is like 3 garage doors.
Yeah.
You know?
Or a car.
Yeah,
Yeah. The entire-
the goal is to direct people away from that. With the design standards, yeah.
But yeah, like Simon said though, I mean, like current. What we have in inventory, you know, in residential areas, like you're looking at tear down, like there's not a lot of places that you can just
Yeah,
up and build a triplex.
I mean, even on a lot of smaller. On. Like a 6,000 square foot lot. You would have a very tough time fitting a triplex on that lot, so. So even a lot of like. Houses that are reaching the end of their functional life. In like the oldest parts of town, like those lots are not big enough to put a triplex on anyway. So
Cause usually in a triplex, all units are gonna be the same or can be the
usually,
same,
yeah,
usually are.
they don't have to be. But
Right.
Generally.
Yeah. And you can actually condominiumize each one,
Yeah, unit conformity
So
in
they're gonna
triplex
be
is usually the thing.
so. Okay. My concern is the impact on the neighborhood landscape.
Right.
So if we can protect that, that's a primary thing, which it sounds like it is, then that makes it a little easier as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
Helpful, I think, to the group would be to know, what are those things that you would like to see besides our building articulations? You want, what would those requirements look like, those design standards look like, that would make it fit for that thing?
A garage
Yeah,
location would be probably a big one, you
So
know.
those would be things we want to make sure we do it. So garage location,
I think we kind of already started talking about that.
and when you talk about the box, so
Yeah.
it's on building articulation and
Right.
modular.
Yeah.
Like we have that.
It's harder to
multifamily code.
seal buildings and stuff, the more.
Eve overhang.
Yeah.
Not lack of eaves, I mean, there's 1 or 2 houses in town that have no eave overhang at all.
I know, one right behind you.
I've always thought that was an interesting construction choice, because your water is everywhere on your home, but
I know.
it sounds like a lot more maintenance over time, but. But I think eave overhangs meshes with some of the existing construction in single family zones, so.
Garage location, eve overhangs.
Not all of it, there's
There's some good design.
there's some little houses like the cute little stucco house next to Faith Lutheran, has no eaves. That is a
The
style.
huge one, the huge white one that's on 2 lots. That's new, that has no eaves. Where's that one?
I was just referring, like, there are old houses with no eaves. Slightly mysterious choice, but it's style.
For 490 or whatever,
Yeah.
that's 1904 built, no eaves.
Oh, wow.
Like, why?
Okay.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I mean, what an interesting thing, like,
Yeah.
let's just stack that snow right up against.
Snow's
that.
right next to
Yeah.
the wall.
Pack it.
Oh, it's a stucco house. It's usually stucco houses with no eaves, and you're like, that is so bad.
Yeah, it's just like the room, you're stuck on just moisture contact all year, all summer long.
I wish my eaves were bigger.
Well, like 3-foot cantilever.
Yeah, huge eaves.
So that, I mean, those design standards are just gonna be really important because we want it to be very clear what they are and not, because what fits the neighborhood to one person may not fit the neighborhood to somebody else.
Right,
Sure.
And how do we make this work for the entire community versus just the street? Like, what's
Yeah.
so cool about Leavenworth is there are so much, there is
Yeah.
a lot, there's not a specific design.
So what, the, Syndicate Smith did those 3 different mock-ups. Is that something we could do for this too, to give guidance? Or- Right, that's a great, I know it costs money, but, right, that would help. They do a great job. They could mock up what like a nice looking truck could be.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a lot of the codes that are easier to understand have visuals.
Happened before.
Huge.
Let's do it again.
So that's helpful.
You guys think you have enough work to tide you up for the next 6 months?
Yes, absolutely. We'll work on this, but the minute the comprehensive plan stuff comes through, we'll be stuck on that, so.
The caveat to that is that we're in a bit of a waiting game for the comprehensive plan. We're waiting game for the redoing the RFP for our
That's
next
what we're
study.
talking about.
So potentially we could have gaps of things to work on.
That was my question, like, do we wanna talk about other planning considerations, or do you feel like you have enough work for 6 months?
I would like to talk about other planning considerations.
Perfect.
Okay.
Should we, run out of material at the moment.
Exactly what I'm supposed to say.
So the first one here is, I know we talked about it,
I
but kind
didn't
of
see it from that side.
tabled it, just concern of feedback from the community, but the R3 zoning district, in the historic zone. Majority of those lots were zoned at 3,500 square feet, and so are mostly non-conforming, which limits the ability to do things like add an ADU, or remodel, or really do much of anything at all. So just checking the temperature in the room, would this be something that you would entertain discussion on again?
I wish we had a map. R3, I think we're in R3. Are we in R3?
There is no R3. We want there to be R3.
We're on Commercial Street in 12th. It's multifamily, right?
There's underlying zones that are free, but that's not what it's.
There was
all
developments in the
about.
very, very beginning of Leavenworth that developed lots that were 3,000 to 3,500 square feet and developed swaths of them, Ralston's, Leavenworth First Edition, these places. And Maggie had a gorgeous map overlaying last time when we talked to you. She's finding it right now. What those areas looked like and what we were talking about. It's not it's not a broad paintbrush of R3. It's
Yeah.
literally going back to those specific areas that were platted as lots that are way under the 6,000 square foot minimum. And if you own one of those, you're kind of handcuffed with what you can do. You can't build an ADU because you don't conform. You're just a non-conforming lot. And our code says if you're non-conforming,
Yeah.
we don't like you.
Yeah.
And so this would be an opportunity for us to, allow those to conform. So some of those people on those smaller lots would have a lot of these tools in the toolbox that you guys have
Do
created.
we want them to
Well,
do these
so,
things though?
so I'm just curious because some of them have been built on as 3,000 square
yeah.
foot on the
No,
other
you
lot.
can
So,
build an ADU, the main limitation, you can't get a variance. If,
okay,
if
so
like
it
lots have
limits,
been
but it doesn't
consolidated.
say that,
Correct.
it doesn't.
No, it's just limited.
It's the lack of variance.
Because the one next to me was the corner lot that was made into 3 lots.
Yeah. Mhm.
And all built on, and again, using the underlying zone.
Allison, you gave some
So-
examples last time of what you're stuck when you go to try and do something with your lot and it's not conforming. I forget some of the examples you have, but it was like, okay, I see then.
Yeah.
We want them to be able to do that. They want to.
Yeah,
If you need a setback issue and you need to apply for a variance, you're just not allowed to.
yeah. I've run into issues with, parking and like where you can access the lot from. That's something that like, I try to get a variance. Some of those parking rules, access rules have changed. You're allowed to use the alleys more now, so it's not as big a deal, but, one of the big things that I've noticed lately is, that some of those historic lots were consolidated. And then you can't go back and
Replat them.
Redraw the
replat them.
lines.
You
So
can't,
you can't split it once they've been.
yeah.
connected.
So
So
they'll,
can-
so
Because
they'll-
of your
Or
underlying
some-
zoning, you can't
So they'll
give them
subdivide it
something.
again.
yeah,
Exactly right.
so they'll be like,
I
oh,
always
we
tell
have
people,
these.
never consolidate your lot.
Yeah, don't
You're diminishing your development opportunity, never, ever.
Don't do it, but it happened, and then somebody will be like, oh, I had these two 45-foot wide lots. But they got consolidated, and then there's a house on the middle of them, but the house is falling apart and needs to be torn down. But I can't separate it back out into two lots,
Right.
because it's not quite big enough to get two lots out of it.
I've run into some boundary line adjustments where they're trying to, maybe they have 3 underlying lots and they're trying to consolidate it down to 2, and there's an existing house. But to move that, adjust that lot line enough, it then doesn't meet minimum width.
Yeah,
So, I mean, there's minimum standard that you don't do.
yeah, the minimum standards
I don't know how to explain that.
for
I
the
can give
zone,
some
like it has a
examples.
minimum width and.
I think it's something
um,
of where this has been a problem, but I agree there is a problem also with our non-conforming.
We would like to look into this. We'd like to know if you guys would like us to.
I'm open to it.
Demand.
I think the community is gonna have some heartburn with it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
but I think if we bring them a lot of information, it provides an opportunity of consideration.
We just lay out that historic planning, this is gonna be the first step. Here's what these were plotted for, and we
Mhm.
kind of put them in a zone now that's not conforming. Is that fair to those owners or not? So
So which of these, did I miss this? Which of these historical plats were the 300, the three?
I have that
1,000.
information somewhere else, I'm sorry.
Off the top of my head, it'll be Ralston, and it will be,
Which is
the central edition. Yeah, there you go, and then,
Well, yeah,
what is
all
that
along
blue?
Park.
And then all over Park on there, which is, I don't know off the top of my head what those are called.
Oh, yeah.
So I think
Miriam,
in the
Miriam.
back,
Marion's.
I have all that information, like, and I pulled lot sizes, like the average lot size of each zone and then the average lot dimensions too, so like the width of them, because a lot of these don't meet any of the standard lot width dimensions. Now, in our L6, all lots have to be 60 feet wide minimum, so that limits, a lot of boundary adjustments as well. But this, I have all the data, I'm sorry, I just don't have it right now on me. But yeah, some of these were definitely more closer to the 3, others were in the 4,000 to 5,000 square foot range, and that, so this just shows everything that's originally cited that's under 6,000. But yeah, some of these are big, are 5,000 square foot lots, some of them are 3,500. But it was just a way to, I guess, without having an R3 and R4 and R5.
So an R3 is just always, well, one thing it is, it's under 6,000 square feet, that's what an R3 is.
Well,
The 3 would mean like 3,000 square foot,
3,000.
because right now it's R6, because 6,000 square feet is the minimum lot size.
Okay.
And then there's other dimensional standards that go along with that. So R3 would be 3,000 square foot minimum lot size, and then we could come up with minimum dimensional standards, like 30 feet wide and.
It just
Cetera,
means to
cetera.
let people take a 6,000 square foot lot and divide it. Is that what
if they were inside those, whatever
If-
zoning district.
If
yeah.
they have an underlying zoning that was originally platted as 3,
But if they don't, then they can't? I mean, you have to have a historical perspective on it, or?
You have to have at
Yeah.
least 6,000 square feet. Which all of these historically, unless they've been consolidated and they're like 12,000 square foot. Now, but. If you were in a true art, like most, like everything else that's new is 6,000 square feet.
At least.
And those would still be R6. So yeah, some of these, I guess, they're bigger lot. We put in that historic lot line.
So Zeke, basically, all of the highlighted ones were, when those were platted, all those lot sizes were under 6,000 square feet
Under our
for the
current,
most part.
Okay,
But then a lot of them have been consolidated into lots that are 6,000 square feet or more, because somebody bought 2 or 3 lots and put them together. So we'd be, so if, you know, it was platted in 1904 and then somebody bought 3 lots and consolidated it, and it's been that way since 1904, you could go back and turn it back into 3 lots
Is that
under the new zoning.
Okay, so is that what's gonna happen in park? Is that what, the one that's so small, is that you got?
Yeah, so all those lots on some park, that not many of them got consolidated, and that's why they're all still that size.
Exactly. And the ones that are consolidated in legal descriptions just read lots 5, 6, and 7 of Miriam's first edition.
Okay. I think it'd be great to pursue this.
Okay, I mean, it's in our back pocket if we run out of content.
Great.
Somehow if we run out of it.
Don't think that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah, and then I guess the next one, HB 1110. This one, if you do adopt the triplexes, so we're talking down the road here, we meet the state requirement, which would be to have 4 of the 9 middle housing defined approaches. And so really this one would be more about, you know, us adopting the state's definitions of duplex, triplex, cottage housing, and then the what's it for, the townhouses, and then, so this would just be really,
It's just definitions, right?
really
It's just state definitions.
This was a recommendation to at least adopt our state definitions, but, we're not required to do missing middle because of our population size. Like,
Yeah.
city Wenatchee, some of the bigger places have to adopt standards to address missing middle. This would be something to look at if you wanted to look at more missing middle options, which.
but we would,
Provide.
yeah, we would achieve this on our own, essentially, if triplexes does, we would have 4 of the 9. So again, this is really more about cleaning up the definitions in the code, so not.
I'm fine with quickly cleaning up some definitions. I wouldn't want us to spend a lot of time on it at this point, because it's not required. I think spending time potentially on DUP regulations would be more positively impactful.
Okay.
To make sure that we actually have specific criteria. I think that's a good one.
Okay.
I can say this CUP criteria came up just last week, where I had somebody from Chelan County, call because they have a proposal in the urban growth. And they're like, this person needs a CUP and there is no criteria, what do I even review this under? I said,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, a good question.
And this is, yeah, I won't get into the weeds, but it's a big project, and there's no specific criteria to address. And that's, you know, we have run into that.
That's problematic, especially when Chelan County is already implementing our language in the urban growth area. And we have no criteria.
Yeah, we're.
I would almost say that for me, that would might be move up above R3 zoning
Okay.
as a priority, but that's just me. The rest of the council can chime in, certainly.
Anybody disagree?
We certainly want things developed appropriately in the urban growth area that will completely from our city limits.
It's the CUP and the code of consistency, we can kind of layer these can get into secondary subject for some of our meetings, so.
Yeah.
For sure, we can, should time be available, we can start addressing some of these as well.
Yeah, I would like to see the CP moved above the HB 1.
It's not just the urban growth area.
No, it's in the city limits.
She's Jenny. She's
But it-
just, that was her.
But it has come up several times in the last couple of years as being problematic.
Correct.
An example is a conditional use permit, you need a CUP to get a bed and breakfast. We have specific criteria for a bed and breakfast, they have to meet like 18 different requirements. If somebody wants to do what is it, a family oriented amusement enterprise, there's no criteria for that. So I have stricter guidelines for something to be fees and for a larger scale. activity that might need more conditions associated with the. Anyway.
I like it, let's bump it up.
Okay, perfect. Excellent, well, I think that's clarity we were looking for. We've got one more thing on our docket, so you would like to adjourn your meeting.
I will
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second record.
All right, all in favor?
Good.
They're going.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Very
Elizabeth, I don't think we.
Could you stay on for a second?
Wait.
Elizabeth.
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
Simon motion to adjourn, Allison seconds, all in favor,
Aye.
it's unanimous.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.